What's up, family? Welcome back. Good to be here today. Pardon my voice. I'm getting over a little cold that I had for like 2 or 3 days. I went outside for the first time in 10,000 years and I caught a cold. So, anywho, welcome back to the Upperroom Community Podcast. I am your host, Raquel Sade, and just welcome to the place where you come to elevate in mindset, habit, and spirit. It's spring is springing. The weather is real nice out here in New York today. So if as you can see in the background, it's pretty sunny today. Hopefully I can get out to enjoy the weather for a little bit. And yeah, it's actually the weekend of Good Friday, Resurrection Sunday. And it's very timely actually for the topic that we're going to be speaking about. My topic has nothing to do with the resurrection or anything like that. But the topic is, drum roll, the power of agreement. And this is going to be a two-part episode. Well, two-part series, I should say. Our topic, two-part topic. And part one, we're going to be discussing breaking agreements. And part two, we're going to be discussing making agreements. The reason why I say it's pretty much in connection with the resurrection and everything is in alignment because Jesus came, he died on the cross. One, to break off old agreements with sin, death, destruction, chaos, and make a new agreement with life and eternal life and joy and peace and good health and prosperity and all of those things that we can be reconciled back with God again. So that's why I say it's in full effect and full in alignment. But anywho, I'm actually very excited for this episode. A lot of the episodes I do, pretty much every episode I do, once like something comes to me for the topic, I just get confirmations after confirmations just throughout my daily life, whether through conversations, whether through scenarios and different things that happen. Either way it goes, there's just always something that's confirming that, ooh, yes, I definitely should be talking about this. And I think that this topic will actually benefit a lot of us. Is very relevant to my life, and I hope that it is relevant to yours and it brings clarity and peace to your life as well. So we're going to start off with what the definition of agreement is. I always, with each topic, love to go back to the defining topic of certain words, what certain words mean, because the meaning of words are very important and it just helps us to further understand and comprehend what's going on so that we can actually apply it to our lives and be beneficial. So the definition of agreement is harmony or accordance in opinion, feeling, or a position in result of agreeing. So an agreement is a very broad word in terms of there's many different types of agreements, right? And especially as a real estate agent, I deal with agreements all the time. So you have a written agreement, you have a verbal agreement, you have a unilateral agreement, you have an implied agreement. And one type of agreement that I really want to focus on today, because we're not talking about contracts here, even though we kind of are talking about contracts in a way in which that these agreements are applied to our life and how they hold us in certain places. But the main agreement that I want to talk about is an implied agreement. A lot of agreements, if we're thinking of just the word agreement, most of the times we're going to think about verbal agreements. And in an interpersonal relationship, in a day-to-day life, most of the things that form our lives, or the type of agreements that are formed and weaved within our lives, are not mainly verbal agreements, but implied agreements. Because an agreement is something you don't have to verbally agree. You don't have to state that you agree, but most times your agreement is based upon your action. In our lives, are mainly formed around implied agreements. And these are agreements that we come into based off of our actions, based off of what we settle with, based off of what we continuously do, based off of patterns that we have with others, that we have with ourselves, and our lives are shaped around a multitude of implied agreements. So an implied agreement, also known as an implied contract, and of course, just think about it not in a literal sense, because we're not discussing real estate law or law in general, but law applying to, our daily lives, not legality or anything like that. But it's a legally binding agreement formed not by explicit words, but by actions, conduct, or circumstances of the parties involved. It's a contract where the understanding of the agreement is inferred rather than expressed verbally or in writing. So the key characteristics of an implied agreement are not being explicitly stated, inferred from actions, there's a meeting of the minds, and of course it is legally binding. So we're not going to touch on, like I said before, the literal meaning of a legally binding contract, but there are certain agreements that don't have to be said and are just done. And because in life they seem to be legally binding, we tend to stick in those agreements, even though some of them can be beneficial and some of them can be a hindrance. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, breaking the agreements that are a hindrance on your life. And knowing that because you do feel bound to that in that moment, in this very moment, doesn't mean that you can't come out of it and you can't be released from it. So as we know that our lives are shaped around our agreements, our lives are shaped around what we come into agreement with, what we act on, what we live by, and those are all formed. Those are all formed by some form of an agreement. As you're watching this, I would like you to reflect on your own life and reflect on and think about the different agreements that you are actively living in right now today, especially implied agreements, because it's so easy to overlook implied agreements, but those can be found in your daily patterns, what you do on a day-to-day basis, who you're in contact with, who takes up your time, what takes up your time, how you fill your time. Those are mainly filled with implied agreements on your day-to-day schedule, Monday or Sunday through Saturday. Implied agreements and agreements in general are formed by a meeting of the minds, as it stated earlier in the definition of an implied agreement. There's something called a meeting of the minds. There has to be some form of mutual understanding between two parties in order for an agreement to be valid. The most obvious way that we can apply an implied agreement is through our relationships, whether that's a family relationship or a friendship or an actual intimate relationship. These can be seen by our interpersonal relationships throughout our lives. But one big thing as well, it's not just about a meeting of the minds between two individuals, but you can have a meeting of the minds within yourself as well, a mutual understanding within yourself. A lot of these mutual understandings between yourself are the very things that are keeping us in certain areas of either fear or discomfort or lack or anything of that nature. It is important that we recognize where we are coming to agreement with within ourselves, within our habits, but within our minds, our thought processes, what we're willing to do and what we're willing to not do, what we're willing to pursue and what we're willing to flee from. These are all based off of a mutual understanding between yourself of knowing what you think you're capable of, what you're not capable of, things of that nature. And we have to be very self-aware of what we have a mutual understanding of in terms of an internal relationship within yourself, because a lot of these mutual understandings, thought processes rule our lives, whether for the good or for the bad. And so we need to definitely sit back and recognize what mutual agreements are ruling our lives in this very moment, which ones need to continue and which ones need to break off. We can see throughout our daily lives how important or how heavy weighted these agreements are, because we know patterns seem so normal until we try to break them. Things seem so much in our control until we try to take things actually into our control by stopping something that we're so used to doing. For an example, I remember someone had said this statement before, like, oh, you think you have control over sin until you try to stop, right? And the best example I can give to that is like smoking. People think like, oh, I'm not addicted to smoking. I just do it. Like, smoking doesn't have control over me. I have control over smoking. But then you actively try to stop smoking. So now you're coming out of agreement with this habit. But because this has been set in stone for such a long time, and because it started with your free will and your free choice, it started to snowball into something where now it's kind of out of your control, but it's something that you enjoy doing. So you don't even really perceive it as something that's out of your control until you try to control it. And then you realize that that thing actually has control over you. And when people try to quit smoking, they don't realize until they quit smoking how much control that habit actually had over them. And so we have to learn to, and learning to quit a habit, continuously coming out of that mutual understanding is so important. And it can be used for anything. It could be used for eating junk food. It could be used for laziness. It could be used for procrastination. It can be used for anywhere in your area where you are trying to stop something, but it seems like that something kind of got a hold on you. You have to continuously choose to come out of mutual understanding with yourself. And that's the thing. This is where the legally binding part comes in into an implied agreement, because it seems, like I said before, like it's in your control until you try to stop it. And then you realize it actually kind of is legally binding. You're kind of bound to this habit or bound to this thing that you were so used to doing, and you didn't realize how bound you were until you tried to break away from it. It's the same thing with the contract. Everything is free flowing, everything is good, like a lease on an apartment. You have your apartment, everything's good, there's no problems until something chaotic happens in the apartment, or something chaotic might happen in your life, or you're just ready to move on or something of that nature. And then you realize, like, dang, I have a lease, and that is a legally binding contract. I can break it, but there's penalties involved. And so it's the same thing with our habits. When we come into a mutual understanding within ourselves, we kind of do form legally binding contracts day to day in our lives that we might not have to pay, in order to break the contract, or there might not be monetary penalties with these contracts or with these agreements in our lives, but there are penalties mentally, there are penalties spiritually. There are plenty of penalties that we face when trying to break off from these agreements that don't really benefit us or can no longer suit us, if you get what I'm trying to say. Because not everything that you're trying to break away from doesn't always have to be a negative thing. But most of the times when you are trying to break away from it, it is because something is negative or something just changed. You just grew out of it. And we realize how legally bound we are in certain things in our lives when we try to break away from these things. So it's important to really sit back and recognize, dang, like, do I have control over these habits, or do these habits have control over me? That's something that we should definitely think on and reflect on when we're looking at our daily habits, our daily routines, and seeing what we actually need to come out of agreement with. The best way that I can explain what I'm talking about right now is, obviously I'm going to resort to the Bible, because it just has so many scenarios, so many stories, so many lessons that we can apply to our day-to-day lives. And so we're going to look at the book of Numbers. And this is obviously, well, it's not obvious, but in the book of Numbers, which is the Old Testament, and this is looking at the children of Israel. The children of Israel, to give context to what is going on in this moment, the children of Israel were previously in Egypt. And in the previous book before Numbers and Leviticus is Exodus, where you can read about the children of Israel being held captive as slaves in Egypt. And they wanted to be free. They were no longer in agreement with that lifestyle. They wanted freedom. And so the Lord came and set them free. And there was a journey between Egypt to the promised land where God had promised for them to settle and have prosperity and peace and live freely. And it was an 11-day journey, but they stayed in the wilderness for 40 years. So in the book of Numbers, where we're looking at now, we're going to be in the setting of where the Israelites were in the wilderness. And at the time, God commanded the Israelites to go and spy out and look at the promised land because they were getting close to it. They were close to it. And he delegated certain people to go and spy out the land to see what the land was full of. And just see, to spy out the land. Anywho, so in this setting, the Israelites were in the wilderness at the time, but they were very, very close to the promised land, the land that the Lord had for them. And he ordered them to go, certain people to go and spy out the land, to go take a tally, or to go take just a note of what they were going to go and inhabit. There were people there, certain types of people there already, but the Lord had already promised the land to them. So we're going to go and read what happened when they went to go and spy out the land. So this is in Numbers 13. I'm just going to read verse 2 and 13 real quick for the context. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them." And we're going to jump down to verses 30 and 33. So there's 12 men went out to spy the land. And they came back from the land and they saw some giants there, some cities there, and some people were obviously settled there. And in verse 32 it says, let's start at verse 31 actually. So remember that they were spies. So they were spying out the land, but the people that were in the land didn't know that they were there because they were spying. So verse 31 says, "But the men who had gone up from him said, 'We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we.' And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, 'The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature,'" meaning tall, they're big. "There we saw giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." This is so jam-packed, and this very much applies to what we agree with for a reason. So remember, it said the land that they went about as spies. They said that it's a land that devours its inhabitants. That right there just stood out to me because they went to spy out the land. They saw people there. They saw people that have inhabited in the space. But they also made it out of the land and came back to report about the land. And they chose to say that it's a land that devours its inhabitants. But they went into the land. So that's the thing. They went into it and they spied and they came out alive. They came out okay. They came out safe. But they still chose to say that it's a land that devours its inhabitants. If that were the case, then they would have been devoured in the land. No? Okay. Now that's one agreement that they made in their head within themselves. Again, a mutual understanding. And they also said that they saw giants in verse 33. "There we saw the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Again, they were spies. The inhabitants did not see them spying out the land. But this shows the power of a mutual agreement, the power and how these agreements become legally binding in our minds and in our own lives. Once we come into a mutual agreement with ourselves, it reflects in our daily lives. Because they said we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. And so we were in their own sight. How do they know what the other people perceived them as? The people didn't even see them, but they came into an agreement with themselves, saying that they became like they are like grasshoppers. So once they already made that up in their mind and came into agreement with that, they had what they were. They were not grasshoppers, but because they chose to feel as though they were grasshoppers in their own sight, they now became like grasshoppers. And because of that, they didn't want to go into the land. They feared it, even though in verse 2 it says, God said, "Go and spy out the land, which I am giving to the children of Israel." He said he's giving it to you. So you should have had already walked into that. No matter what you've seen, you should have already walked into that environment. You should have already walked into that job. You should have already walked into that business opportunity. You should have already walked into that relationship. Whatever it is that you know is yours, that God is already giving you, that because he already said in his word that it's his, and he's not a man that should lie. His word says that as well. You should already go in there with that boldness and that confidence and that agreement that it is already settled because God said he's giving it. But they chose to not come into agreement with that, but to come into agreement with the lie. And so because they came into agreement with the lie therefore became a truth in their own life, and they did not see the promised land. The only ones that saw the promised land were the two that said they were able to go in and accomplish it. And that is in verse 30, where Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." He had that mindset, and guess what? He was able to see the promised land. He was able to step into the promised land and live in the promised land. Him and Jake, what's this man's name? Joshua, I'm sorry. Him and Joshua both came into agreement with what God said, that they were getting the land and that the land is theirs. And they both had the agreement that they are able to overcome it. And guess what? They overcame because they came into agreement with the truth. And that's the thing. A lot of things in our lives are formed based off of a lie. A lot of places where we are right now are formed based off of a lie that we came up with on our own selves. A lot of times we are in these places of stagnation. We are in these places of lack. We are in the middle of nowhere because of a lie that we came into agreement with about ourselves, a mutual agreement that became legally binding in our lives. We tell ourselves we are not capable. We tell ourselves we don't have enough money to do it. We tell ourselves we don't have enough time to do it. We tell ourselves, oh, I'm too alone. I'm too lonely. I don't want to do this by myself. I can't do this by myself. Oh, it's going to be so hard. Oh, good things take time. All these different concepts and lies that we tell ourselves that were a lie, but became a truth in our life because we came into agreement with the lie. And that lie became binding, and that lie made us stuck in the same place. And therefore we were never able to leave it because we chose to believe in a lie. Please do not believe in a lie. Stop speaking lies over your life. Stop having mutual agreements with lies. Stop coming into agreement with lies. Break those agreements. Please, I'm telling you, take a census, take notation of the different thoughts that you are having about yourself and about where you are and about where you are supposed to go. Please, because I'm telling you, a lot of our lives are plagued with lies, and we will continue to stay in these spaces where we don't want to be because we will continue to choose to believe in a lie. So come into agreement with the truth. This is a perfect story, and this is why I love the Bible. It's not about religion, but it's about applying truth, God's truth to your life and watching it flourish. God told them that they were capable and that he said the land was theirs. He was giving it to them. And so we have to learn to replace these lies with the truth and come into agreement with the truth. Because if you can see how powerful it is to come into agreement with the lie and be stuck in it, then how much more powerful is it to come into agreement with the truth and be stuck in the truth and operate in power through the truth. The next place I want to go to is the next chapter, Numbers 14, verses 3 and 4. This is what the Israelites, after they received the bad report from those that chose to come into agreement with the lie, everybody else followed suit because the majority believed in the lie and only 2 believed in the truth. And again, none of these people saw the promised land because they came into agreement with the lie. The ones that came into agreement with the truth were able to go and see and dwell in the promised land. But verse 3 and 4. Verse 3 says, "Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" So they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." Again, they chose to believe in a lie. He said, why would the Lord bring us to this land to fall by the sword, to be defeated, when God said, this is the land that I'm already giving you. This is yours already. It's already yours. Just step into agreement with me and I will empower you to take over the land. It's already yours. They didn't want it. They came into agreement with the fact that the Lord brought them there to die out. And so they rather return to captivity. They rather return to the place where they cried, where they died, where they bled, where they were abused. They chose to say, I want to return back to that, to the land where they were even crying to be delivered from, because they saw something. It looked impossible to them, or it looked too hard for them, and they chose to settle where they once were. And where do we choose to do that in our lives? Because we are no different. And it's so easy to read these stories and be like, oh my God, they are so dumb. Like, we do this every single day. And that's why I would say that appointing a leader to send you back into captivity, where do we do that? Who do we appoint in our lives to bring us back to the place we were just fighting to get out of? And crying to get out of, and depressed because we need to get out of this space. And then you choose to get out. And this is the thing. Just because you choose to leave the place physically doesn't mean mentally and spiritually you're still not there. And so this is where we have to reprogram our minds. And again, it's all down to a mutual agreement. We have to come into a mutual agreement with ourselves. Break off the mutual agreement we had in that space, because it is very easy. For an example, the easiest thing we can use for this is a breakup, right? You were in a relationship. The person was not the best. They weren't great to you. They didn't cater to your needs. They were taking advantage of you. They were doing all of these different things. Whatever you want to use, apply it to your life. But this is the best way that I can explain it. And you say, all right, I'm going to step out. I'm going to leave. I got to get out of here. I need to get out of here. You were brought out. But in the place of solitude, in that place, in the wilderness, in that temporary holding place of the wilderness where you are now alone, where you now have to figure out who you are again, who you are single, who you are without this person. You have to figure out what makes you you and not what makes you us, if you get what I'm saying. And that seems all too hard. You're lonely, you're sad, it's depressing, all of these crazy thoughts are coming into your head. And so because you hate the place that you're in and the place that you think you'll be at in the future, you start to romanticize where you previously were before. When you were there, you were depressed. When you were there, you were crying. When you were there, you hated it. When you were there, you complained to your friends time and time again about how you hated being there. And you left. But your heart, your mind, your spirit was still held there. You didn't come out of agreement with that place where you first were because you're still romanticizing it. You're still glorifying it. You're still asking to be there. You are physically gone, but your mind and your spirit still remain. And so what did you do? You went back and you said, let's go back to that space. I want to be there again. Let's go back. And you go back. And then when you go back, you actually remember, like, dang, why did I come back? I'm bugging out. That happens to us all the time. To go back to romanticizing a place where you once hated, the perfect verse for that is Numbers 11, verse 5. So we're going to jump back a few chapters. But this verse is so good. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Numbers 11, verse 5. Again, remember, this is the children of Israel in the wilderness right now. They said, we remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up. There is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. In the wilderness, God provided manna. The Israelites named it manna. I'm going to tell you what the word manna means. Give me 1 second. Because even the meaning of the word manna is like, bruh, yo, these people are crazy. We be wildin', bro. We be wildin'. Okay. We be wildin', bro. And this is why, like, we really got to thank God that we're not God. Because if we were God, we would have destroyed ourselves a long time ago. Anywho. All right. So the word manna means, what is it? Literally. What is it? And it's a kind of bread that fell from heaven in the wilderness. Literally, it's a wilderness. They didn't have anything there. It was dry. It was nothing there, but God provided, and he provided manna literally from heaven. He provided bread from heavenly bread, and it lasted for the day, and then it would fall again and they would eat. And even the word, what it means is, what is it? Like, like that's such a violation to me. It's like, you named it. What is this? Like you came from a place, like if somebody comes and gives you something and you're like, what is this? Like, dang, yo, like we really be trifling. It's like God really provided something for you in this space, in this temporary holding space. And the reason why you're still there is because you keep acting like this. Like, anyways, I don't want to go off on a tangent about that. That's not what we're talking about right now. But what stood out to me in verse 5 is when they said, we remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt. And what I wanted to say about that is, nostalgia is a lie. Nostalgia is a big lie, because they said, we remember when we ate this freely in Egypt. Freely where? In captivity? You freely ate when you were a slave? It's like, and that's what we do as human beings when we're in this space of transitioning, when we're in this space where we should be breaking off the past agreements and looking to come into agreement with new things. Breaking off agreements are not easy. It's a process. It takes time to root out and to come out of these mutual agreements that you came into with whether an individual or with yourself. It's a process. You have to be purged from these agreements. You literally, it takes work to break these out. And because the process is hard, a lot of the times we look back to the place where we once were and we romanticize it. And nostalgia is a huge lie. We look back at these places and times where it's like, oh my gosh, like, oh, that was a time of life. We had such a great time. It was so much better then. But then if you look at the whole picture, you were depressed. You hated being there. You didn't have a good time. It was actually really hard for you. And you were crying to get out. And now you're out of it, but you're in the process of fully coming out of it, fully coming out of agreement with the things that you have made in that space, and you're romanticizing it again. We do that so much in our lives, and I want us to really hold on. If you are in that place where it's like, all right, I need to leave this, when you do, please take the time to make sure you are really free from it. Please do the work. It is hard, but good things do not always have to take time. It just takes your willingness. That's it. Good things do not always have to take time. You just have to be willing to get to the good thing. And that good thing can take work, but it doesn't always have to take time. I think a lot of times the amount of time that we take is based off of the willingness that we have to actually get to the next point. And the perfect example of that is the children of Israel. An 11-day trip took them 40 years. They died in that wilderness. The older generation died in that wilderness because they were not willing to keep going. They weren't willing to pursue. They weren't willing to go through the process of purging out the old life to be ready for the new agreements that were coming on, to be ready for the new things that they were stepping into. They weren't ready and they weren't willing. They were not able. So they did not eat of the good of the land, the milk and the honey and the prosperity. They didn't partake of it. They didn't eat it because they weren't willing to do it. So let's make sure as a people that we actually do the work so that we can see the goodness that is actually set out for us. And that brings me to forgiveness. Forgiveness is an essential part in breaking off agreements. And you say, how would you think that? Why do I need to forgive in order to break something off? Because in most times in our culture, most things are broken off based off of a lack of forgiveness, because something traumatizing happened, or because something bad happened, or something that hurt you happened. We break it off. But in our culture, it is normalized to not forgive, to hold somebody to that, to make them accountable for your pain. And I'm not saying that those places of pain were not real or not relevant, but it's important not for the individual that hurt you, but it's important for yourself to forgive. Because if you do not forgive, you will stay in that place in your mind and it's holding you. It goes back to that space where you broke it off and physically you are in another place, but your soul, which is your mind, your will, and your emotions, are still in that place where you once left. And so you're still held captive mentally. You're still held captive spiritually. And when those things are taking up your space, it is impossible to move on to something else and to come into a mutual agreement with that. We see that all the time with relationship trauma. You broke up with someone, you were in a relationship, and it was a toxic situation, but because you did not yet forgive and you did not yet release yourself mentally and spiritually from that place that you were previously, you jump into the new relationship with old agreements, and there's chaos in that. We have to learn to break off these mutual agreements, and that comes through forgiveness, and not just forgiving others, but also forgiving yourself, because a lot of times in culture, we also too, we don't want to accept our dirt. I've played a horrible part in life at times, and so have a lot of us. And we have to accept the fact that we did do dirt. And that comes with forgiving yourself. You don't have to be held to that any longer, just like you wouldn't want somebody holding you to your past. And we shouldn't do that with others, and we shouldn't do it with ourselves. We shouldn't torture ourselves with who we once were, what we once did. Oh, I regret that. I wish I never did it. It happened. It happened. And all regret does is keep you in that space, and it keeps you bound legally. It keeps you bound to where you're never able to be free from it and move on. We have to move on, and forgiveness is an essential part of that. Once you choose to forgive yourself, once you choose to forgive the other party, watch how freeing your soul will become. It's like lifting weights off of your shoulder. We cannot step into the goodness of a new thing if we're still held bound mentally captive by the old thing. It doesn't work. And so we have to learn to forgive. We have to learn to move on. We have to learn to accept who we are and accept who we once were, die to it, meaning come out of agreement with it mentally and spiritually, and come into agreement with who you are becoming. And that brings me to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. In 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17, let's turn to that real quick. And again, this is just perfect for the resurrection. Because of the resurrection, we are able to kill off the old things by the grace of God and step into the new things by the grace of God. So in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17, it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new." Simple as that. Simple as that. How do you put yourself in Christ? You come into agreement with him. You latch on to what he's already done for you and you hold on to it. That's it. Old things have passed away and all things have become new. You are a new creation. And so if you are a brand spanking new, right? When we get a new phone, there is no memory on this phone. This phone has no photos on it. This phone has only the program setting apps, no customized apps. It has no custom lock screen. It has no contacts. It's completely wiped clean. We are a brand new phone. When you are in Christ, when you come to Christ, you are wiped clean. It's like an old MacBook. You wipe it out. There's no more data in it. There's freedom of storage. The storage is not full. You are wiped clean. And that's what we need to do. That's what we need to come into agreement with. Sorry, my mom texted me, so I got distracted. That's what we need to come into agreement with, is that we are made new. We are a new creation. We are wiped out. Everything from the past is dead. Everything that we once done is dead. Every sin that we've committed is dead. Anytime that we've hurt someone, it's dead. And so we have to come into agreement with that in our soul. Accept it for the truth in our soul. Breaking off those past agreements, the agreements with things that we've done in the past, breaking those things off and coming into agreement with the truth that we are new. And once you have that mutual agreement, you will walk in that newness. Freedom comes from agreement. You have to first agree in order to become free. It doesn't benefit anybody if you are legally free, but you have no idea that you're free, because you will stay in the same place. You have to learn that you are free. You have to learn that you are made new. You have to learn that you are a new creation, so that therefore you can live it out. And I want to read something really quick about something God had literally gave me one time in prayer. And I was just battling with myself and learning to forgive myself. Because one thing with my mind, I'm an overthinker, and I used to beat myself up a lot. And I was asking God for forgiveness, and I was also asking God for freedom. Freedom from cycles of like self-condemnation and strongholds, and just freedom from mental torment, and just overall freedom, and to have peace and everything like that. And God said, freedom has already been given on the cross. Freedom from everything that I want to be free from, and that I want to be free to. all I need to do is come into agreement with the freedom that has already been given and walk in it. Because freedom from is freedom to. So you can only become free first from the place that you have last left, and then be able to accept the freedom to the new place that you are going. And he said, from walking in my freedom, I will have peace. From walking in my freedom, I will have righteousness. From walking in my freedom, I will have joy. From walking in my freedom, I will have healing. From walking in my freedom, I will have prosperity. From walking in my freedom, I will have abundance. And that just, it hit so much because, again, I'm sitting here praying and asking God for freedom. And I'm saying, can you free me from this cycle? Can you free me from this condemnation? Can you free me from just this mental torment? I'm asking for it. And the answer was so good because he said, it's already there. I have to accept the freedom. I have to come into agreement with it. Because listen, I was already free, but because I'm sitting there I'm asking for something that I already have. That's crazy. And because I didn't think I had it, I'd allowed myself to come into a mutual agreement with self-condemnation. I'd allowed myself to come into mutual agreement with torment, with self-hate, with all of these different things because I agreed with that. I didn't agree with freedom. And so once true freedom was exposed to me, I was then able to latch onto that and come into agreement with it and no longer have self-hate, self-condemnation, self-loathing, the woe is me. I don't hold on to that anymore. It's not a part of me. Why? Because I accepted my freedom. My freedom is real. It's tangible. It's here. And now I'm able to operate through that. And so this is truth, and this is something that we should learn in terms of what truly breaking agreements off mean. That it's not just we broke up. It's not just I left my job. It's not just I left this old city where I'm from. I left the hood. I left my old friend group behind. I left this behind. I left that behind. It's not just about leaving it behind physically, but it's about breaking those things off that you were so much into at the time, mentally and spiritually, because we become one with these places because they become binding. We become bound to these places that we first were. And so we have to learn to break off those agreements that we once had in those spaces in order to hold on to the new. And so this is why part 1 for the power of agreement was first about breaking off agreements, because you have to break, you have to leave to cleave. And so the next episode, we will speak about coming into agreement with what is good, agreement with the new, agreement with freedom, agreement with peace, love, and prosperity, and all the things that will bring you abundance and joy and happiness in life. And so I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It went much longer than I thought it was going to go. I'm loving it. I'm going to keep up with it. I'm liking the pace at which this is going. And so I'm grateful to God. But let me know what you guys think. Please, please, please do not forget to share this episode. Share with someone that you think would benefit from it. Share with your mama, your papa, your cousin, your auntie, your friends on Instagram. Share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram, share it on TikTok. Do whatever you got to do. Get it out there. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see y'all on the next episode. I love you guys so much. So grateful for the love and the support. And I will see y'all next time.